Hi, everybody. Once again, I'd just like to welcome you to the HOT Community Working Group. This is one of our webinars. This one's presented by Daniel Joseph from the American Red Cross, and he's going to be discussing mobile data collection tools today. And with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Joseph, or Daniel rather, my apologies.
No worries. Thanks, Blake. Can you see my presentation?
Yes,
Sharing my screen?
looks good. Yep, looks good.
Excellent. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining this morning. Like Blake said, I'm Dan Joseph. I'm a GIS officer with the American Red Cross and their International Services Department. And this morning I'm going to talk a bit about mobile data collection, some of the concepts behind how we approach it, and some of the tools that we use and have enjoyed using to benefit our work. I'm part of a small team at the American Red Cross focused on our work internationally with other Red Cross and Red Crescent national societies, supporting disaster resilience, response, and recovery programs. We help to create, store, and use data to increase the efficiency and impact of our work. And yeah, work with this global movement of organizations, and it's pretty great. When we approach mobile data collection, kind of the core concept that we consider is that it's not about the gear, it's about the data. And it's collecting data to create information. You can have the fanciest tools, the fanciest technology in the world, but if you're not using it in an effective, positive, thoughtful manner, it's not going to do you any good. Just because you have the newest phone or the newest app doesn't mean you're not going to be wasting your time if you don't plan and execute your activities properly. But mobile data collection does offer a lot of potential benefits. It can be faster. It combines surveying and encoding into one step. So there's no stacks of paper that you have to sift through and then type into the computer manually later. As you're collecting the data during your survey or during your observations, it's going straight into digital format. It's also possible to analyze the data as it's being collected. If you have connectivity while you're doing the data collection, you can submit the forms, submit the data immediately. And since it's automatically aggregated by the server that's collecting the data, it makes it possible to do ongoing analysis if you have those tools set up. It can be more accurate. You can have enforced survey logic, like skip logic and constraint checks to guide the person collecting the data. On pieces of paper, you can have instructions and you can have guidance, but people can ignore, choose not to read or skip that guidance. With a digital form, you can make sure that required questions cannot be skipped, that the screen has to be stayed on until the answer is provided, and other things of that nature. There's no encoding, so there's no transcription errors. It's hard enough, I think, sometimes to read your own handwriting the next day. Sometimes I leave myself notes and have no idea what the note says. And so when somebody else especially has collected data on a paper form and you have to write down or type in what they've written, it can be quite hard to do so accurately, especially when it comes to numbers. You know, sometimes a 1 looks like a 7. Spelling people's names can also be a challenge as well. Sometimes we have people typing in the forms who speak a different first language than the people who recorded the forms. And so that can be an added challenge when accurately reading what's been written on a piece of paper. It can provide more and different types of data. It can be more informative when using mobile data collection. You can have accurate timestamps that are automatically recorded for the start and end time of your survey, allowing you to analyze accurately and in great detail how long it's taking people to complete the forms. You can collect things like GPS coordinates and photographs. All these, you know, making for much richer data than would be possible with simple pen and paper. It doesn't stop with mobile data collection though. Really, like, it feeds into, like I was saying earlier, collecting data and creating information. Data itself, you know, individual numbers or statistics don't say much. like knowing the location of a single fire hydrant, a single water source in a town is not very useful. But if you have a whole lot of data points on the locations of water sources, and then also information about the types of materials used to build structures, then you can start to create information like fire risk, actionable information that can help you guide programs and activities. Things like mobile data collection are best when combined with open data formats, open source software, and open community. So you can build on what other people are doing, share, and benefit everybody. From a humanitarian perspective, from when we're working, it helps us improve accountability to both beneficiaries, so the people we're trying to help, and also to donors, the people who give us money and trust us to do good work and to help people. And also increasingly in the humanitarian world, there's more robust, more difficult donor reporting requirements, and those are more easily met when you incorporate things like mobile data collection into your programs. So what exactly is mobile data collection? There's generally a couple main key components. You have a device of some kind, usually a smartphone or a tablet that can be used to fill out a survey. It usually communicates with some sort of server, both to get the blank forms, so to get the list of questions that are to be asked, and also to submit completed survey forms, to submit that data back for aggregation. The server can be in the cloud, it can be locally on a piece of hardware like a laptop or some other sort of physical server you have in the room, and other things of that nature. Generally then, the server provides some sort of export functionality so that you can access the data via an API or a download, usually in some sort of open format like a CSV or XLS file, your basic spreadsheet. And then from that data, you want to be able to create information. There are a variety of platforms that you can use. On the screen are the logos of just a few of them. From an end user perspective, the interfaces are largely the same. If you have like a team of enumerators, a team of people going out to survey, the difference between Survey CTO or Fulcrum or OpenDataKit or Magpie is not going to be very great. They'll probably be able to learn, after they've learned one platform, it'll be easy to learn another. Most of the differences are in how the forms are created and what functionalities the server-side interface provides. We at Red Cross prefer open source projects. They're great for a number of reasons. Usually, they have strong communities behind them, and they're not reliant on the decisions of a single company. You can, if you want to get something done, you can find the money, find the people, and get it done. You don't have to petition and ask a company to do it, and you don't have to rely on it being something of monetary value or worth for them to want to do it. Usually, they're easy to scale. Oftentimes, if you have a server for your mobile data collection, it's relatively inexpensive to just upgrade your AWS, your Amazon or Microsoft web account and get a slightly larger server. In the case of some of the software services or proprietary softwares for mobile data collection, if you surpass one of their or their kind of account levels, it might be quite expensive if you add a certain number of surveyors or a certain number of submissions per month. And that feeds into it. Open source projects tending to be more economical, a little bit cheaper, and cost effective if you have the technical expertise. And it's these communities generally have a collaborative and supportive ethos, a kind of the same thing that draws people to humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, to volunteering digitally, and the same thing that we enjoy with our jobs here at Red Cross, kind of is behind a lot of these open source communities as well. People just trying to make a difference and help each other. One of the major open source projects for mobile data collection that we enjoy and use is OpenDataKit. It's a free and open source set of tools, originally out of, I think, University of Washington in 2007, 2009. It's been around for a number of years now, and is constantly improving and is very robust and strong now, and allows users, provides a number of different tools to build survey forms, the server solutions, the device solutions, allowing you to conduct mobile data collection. One of the softwares built on top of OpenDataKit is KoBo Toolbox. And so this is based directly on the ODK source code. And it's intended, just like ODK, as a tool for field data collection for use in challenging environments. This one specific to humanitarian purposes, as it was developed by the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative and is heavily supported by UN OCHA, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. It is still actively being developed and improved. You can learn more and try it out at kobotoolbox.org. And there's unlimited use for humanitarian organizations and also for any other people as well. You can sign up for an account, and there is a limit, but I think it's something like 10,000 submissions per month. So except for very large data collection campaigns, it should be fine. I would be surprised if you ran into that limit. There is, for the application on the phone, ODK has an app called ODK Collect, and it's actually compatible with both ODK, the ODK servers and also with the KoBo Toolbox servers. And it's allows you to do all like the basic functionality you would expect. You can download the blank forms, you can fill out the forms and save them to the phone itself, and then you can submit the finalized forms to the server when you have connectivity. And it's pretty heavily customizable in terms of the interface. You can actually use the administrator settings and have it so that only the fill blank form option is viewable from the main screen. And you can limit without via like a password what settings can be changed. So you can kind of lock down the app to make it a little bit easier for your data collectors to only do what they're supposed to be doing. And ODK Collect is awesome. There's an active developer community behind it, and they're constantly releasing updates and bug fixes. Here's a recent tweet from them where they just introduced a dark mode and some other improvements. So it's really exciting to see how that software is constantly improving. It's a simple interface. You can swipe through or add buttons, forward and back buttons to the interface through one of the settings. And the questions look much like any other web input form that you would see. Here's just some examples of a select one question, the interface for taking a picture, and collecting GPS coordinates. A side note, so far I've been talking mostly about just general survey questions. Also, we use mobile data collection for OpenStreetMap data. A number of years ago, when Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines, we supported a review of a crowdsourced damage assessment done using satellite imagery to see how effective it was. And it turned out that, for one, the satellite imagery wasn't particularly good for the crowdsourced imagery assessment. And also, the review in the field was actually very difficult. There were a lot of challenges with finding a building in the field and matching it to the feature in OpenStreetMap that representing it. We wanted to improve the process, and the first one, trying to improve satellite imagery, was not really possible. But the second one, figuring out a better way to survey and link the data to features in OpenStreetMap, was a little bit more feasible. And that led to us leading development on OpenMapKit, which is a way that you can save OpenStreetMap data to a device and then use it within a survey. So you can add tags to existing features and also create features in OpenStreetMap. And it just makes it a little bit more direct, a little bit easier to gather and create that data. Additionally, we've developed a tool called Possum, Portable OpenStreetMap, which puts the OpenMapKit server and a couple of other tools like field papers into a software stack that you can install either in the cloud or on a piece of portable hardware like an Intel NUC, a little mini computer, and then take that into an area where there's no internet connectivity, so you can conduct a mapping campaign without internet. OpenMapKit is built into the OpenDataKit set of tools. You don't ever actually launch the OpenMapKit app directly. Instead, you include an OpenMapKit type question within your ODK survey. And then when you get to it, it then launches the external app and saves the data within your ODK survey. One other side note, kind of related to mobile data collection, is the collection of street level imagery. We have been exploring this for some time now, collecting imagery in places like Canaan, Haiti, and also post-disaster in a couple areas like Dominica. And there's two platforms right now that are pretty open. Mapillary, which makes their images available in the various editors like ID and JOSM, and also makes a layer of extracted street signs available for editing in OpenStreetMap. And then also OpenStreetCam, which also is doing some neat stuff with imagery, automated image extraction and things of that nature. So there's a couple of main steps to mobile data collection. The first part is designing and encoding your survey. There's a number of ways you can do this. It can be done in Excel using something called XLSForm, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute. It can also be done with non-technical tools. So the ODK tool set has something called ODK Build, which is a graphic user interface for designing your survey forms. And also KoBo Toolbox, if you log onto their website, part of the interface includes a interface for authoring and creating forms. Forms can be hosted on your server of choice and downloaded to the devices if you have internet connectivity. They can also be transferred directly to a device memory using a USB cable. And you also, after part of designing this first step is setting up that repository online or locally. So either KoBo Toolbox, ODK Aggregate, ODK Briefcase, any of these server options. An important thing to consider at this stage is the writing of your questions. Good data comes from good questions. You should really, at the start of your activities, have a data analysis plan. Each question you want to ask yourself, why am I asking this? What am I going to do with the data? Coordinate and consult. If there's other people that need to collect data in the same area, figure out what they need to learn and find out if you can combine your efforts. In our case, when we're working for a disaster or in a humanitarian situation, each time you have to go and talk to someone, you're taking, somebody who maybe has just been affected by a disaster. They have things like they need to repair their house. They need to worry about, fixing their store, getting medical help for their family. Each time you go and survey them, you're taking valuable time away from them. You're also using resources. You're using staff time, volunteer time, and other money to drive people around. So you want to make sure that when you're collecting this data, when you're asking these questions, that you have a good reason for doing it. And you want to make sure that your data is going to be timely, thoughtful, and effective. If it takes you 6 months to collect all the data you need, but the decision needs to be made in 1 month, you need to rethink your data collection plan. You need to think about the difference between qualitative or quantitative data. So qualitative data approximates or characterizes, but does not measure the attributes, characteristics, or properties of a thing or phenomena. So qualitative describes, whereas quantitative defines. Generally, mobile data collection is better suited for quantitative data. It's most effective when you're recording numbers or selecting specific options from a list, as opposed to open format kind of free text questions where someone might talk for a minute or two and you're trying to record that. It's not very easy to type out a long, complicated answer on a phone or tablet keyboard, and also it's hard to analyze. If you have 30 surveys and each one has a couple paragraphs of text that you need to read, that already is a large amount of text to read and try and figure out. It's easier to analyze data generally that's in buckets. So if you have predefined options that people are selecting from a list, it's much easier to figure out totals, to figure out averages and things like that. If you're asking someone about what relief supplies they've received, somebody might answer plastic sheeting, somebody might answer tarp, somebody might answer tarpaulin, somebody might answer tarpaulins. And those different answers, while a person reading them might know that they're the same thing, if you're trying to analyze it in a Excel or in a other computer program, the computer isn't smart enough to know that those 4 things are the same. And so you're going to get 4 items with people receiving 1 of each, instead of what you really want, which is 4 tarps being received. XLSForm, which I mentioned, is a robust way with a lot of control to create your survey forms. It is a syntax, a format that's compatible with a number of different mobile data collection platforms. And at its core, it requires just 2 worksheets in a spreadsheet. One survey, the top one here, which has your questions defined, in the basic columns being type, name, and label. So each row of the worksheet becomes a question in your form, and those different columns define different attributes of that question. So in this case, line 2 today is metadata. It'll automatically record the date that the survey is filled out. Then you can see line 3 is a select one type question. Male _ female is referencing the list of options. The name column is the unique ID that you've given to that question. So it becomes the column headers in your data export. And then label in this case is the text that's displayed to the person filling out the form. So they, when they start the form on their phone, the first question they see will be asking respondent's gender, and then the options being shown to them will be just male and female as shown on the second sheet. And there's a ton of more options and ways that you can introduce different question types and change kind of the formatting of your question and add in the survey logic and constraints. And all of that is in good detail on xlsform.org. The documentation for this is really great. So some of those things I was talking about, what exactly is skip logic? So this allows you to automatically skip questions that are not relevant. If you're asking how many people in the household are under 12 years old and they answer 0, so that they have no children, you can then skip questions about childhood nutrition. Those questions don't matter for that particular survey. This can save a lot of time for your people doing the surveys. Constraints and required questions. So on paper, if a survey response is left blank, you don't know if they decided not to answer, if they didn't know, if maybe they accidentally skipped it. You can, on the digital form, make sure that they're not able to do that. But then you also have to be sure that you provide all of the possible answers that might be there. So if asking for the respondent age, so how old somebody is, you could limit the response to between 0 to 125, but then also allow people to input 777 for no response from the person being questioned, or enter maybe 999 for if they don't know. In some places you might encounter people who aren't sure of their exact age. Another example of a good constraint, if you're asking somebody how many days a week do they visit a market, you can make sure that the answer is between 0 and 7, since 8 or more would be an impossible answer for days of the week. You can do some automatic calculations in data checks. So here is an example where you've asked for the breakdown by gender and age of a household. And then the form automatically totals those numbers and presents it in a confirmation screen to the user, allowing them to check to make sure that they've input the right numbers. And if not, they can go back and check those answers. One of the functionalities of ODK that we really enjoy is the ability to encode multiple languages. This isn't automatic like Google Translate. You have to manually add each language to your form. But once you've done the translations within ODK Collect, you can change language when you're filling out your form and switch between those languages that you've input. Once you start learning XLSForm, there's all sorts of tips and tricks. Things like phone numbers should be a text type question, not an integer type question, because of the length of the field and the way computer databases work. You can also do things like use regex functions in the constraint column to make sure that in like a text input field, if you're asking for a barcode or an ID number that's always a certain format, that the people input that format. When you're creating your forms, you want to test. This allows you to correct for grammar, logic and flow, and other mistakes that you might have missed. It allows you to troubleshoot any issues with your device and check that your server is set up and working properly. A thing to keep in mind is data protection and privacy. If any of you have worked with a business or organization that, from the EU or that area, you would know that the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, has come into effect, and there can be major consequences for an organization that collects or uses personal data improperly. So you need to encrypt and safeguard as necessary. Although it may be more difficult, it's definitely a needed thing. You need to protect the data of people that you're collecting and make sure that you do all the proper things, like get permission and tell them how you're going to use their data. Once you've created your form and you've gone through all those steps, you can collect your data. With ODK Collect and most of the mobile data collection tools that you might use, they can be done online or offline. Phones can generally save the completed submissions to the device until you are back in connectivity and can submit to the server. Things like GPS only require a clear view of the sky. They use satellites and not the cellular network or Wi-Fi to work. So all the functionality should be available offline. Just some checklists like to keep in mind ahead of time. Just remember that good data comes from good questions. Always take a lot of time to think about your survey and what you want to answer. You always want to test the survey on devices. You don't want to have spent days or weeks collecting data and then realize that there was a mistake in your survey or that something was not functioning properly. You need to train the people doing the interviews, especially if you have a team. They need to have the same understanding about questions, what's being asked, and the meaning of the questions. You should have talking points, so a briefing for everyone so that they can explain key concepts. And you need to train the people doing the surveys in how to do things like deal with confrontation, deal with long talkers. If it's supposed to be a 5-minute survey and somebody wants to tell you their whole life story and keep talking to you for an hour, you might need a polite way to end the conversation so that you can continue on and do the next survey. And you want to inform necessary stakeholders, whether it's the community where you're doing interviews or collecting data. If you need to inform government officials, other organizations, you need to know who should be informed and told about your activities. Immediately prior, kind of or in the day prior to your survey, you want to just make sure that the people in the area where you're going to be doing your surveys, your data collection, are aware. Do any necessary safety checks, checking things like weather, you know, police reports, things like that, to make sure that it's a safe area to go. You need to make sure all your phones are charged and that you get them all set up with the downloaded survey forms. There's things beyond just data collection itself in your survey form. There's other things like logistics, transportation, and food that need to be arranged. Always a good idea to keep an eye on weather and safety concerns. In addition to the training, initial training of your people doing the surveys, you'll need to do some sort of orientation prior to sending people out. If you're just giving people phones instead of having them bring their own devices, you'll need some sort of checkout system for your hardware, your devices. You'll probably want some sort of set of rules about using the phones only for the data collection and not for personal use. You need to make sure that they understand how to turn the GPS on if that's being used in the survey. A safety brief is always a good idea. Make sure people understand where they're going, how to get in touch in case of an emergency. And make sure people know the schedule, their assignments, and the goals for the day. For us, we like generally to have all our volunteers having some sort of Red Cross visibility. So whether it's an organizational vest or a hat, or even just an ID card. And if you're if you are sending out a team to do data collection, generally you want them to have some sort of identification so that they can explain who they are and what they're doing. They should be good representatives of your organization or your group. And also, it's important that people are being safe and having fun. So the same things I just mentioned. Make sure people know what they're doing, where they're doing it. Make sure that they have all the equipment they need. If you're going around, outdoors, there's additional safety precautions. When you're conducting surveys, if you're interviewing people, you always want to start with a proper introduction, explain what you're doing, why you're doing it. And when you're finished, you always want to thank people for their time. The simple things like make sure people stay hydrated and drink water. GPS, if it's the first GPS point of the day, you need to wait a little bit of extra time for it to get a good fix, so you have an accurate location. In some places, weather can change rapidly. You don't want to be stuck out in the rain with some electronic equipment, so be sure to keep an eye on the weather. And there's tricks for saving battery power when using phones. You can adjust the screen brightness down to low. You can do things like turning on the flight mode. If you turn off Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and things like that, the phone will not be searching for those signals, and it will save some battery power. And if you only use the one app that you need, only the ODK Collect app, that'll also save battery power as well. You can also we'll often have the external batteries that we can, as backups, to charge phones when out in the field. Again, when surveying, you always want your team to be professional and courteous and polite. Asking permission to interview at the start, thanking people at the end, watching the weather and other safety concerns, and being aware of your surroundings. At the end of the day, you need to make sure that everybody is back and safe. You need to check that everybody submits their forms, and kind of clear out phone memory if necessary. Sign back in the equipment, make sure you have everything's in good working order. And it's always good to do a debrief if you have a team. So immediately after the first day, find out about any problems, any issues, any concerns, so that you can address those, so you can fix those, but also any success stories. So if you have a team going out for many days, doing a lot of data collection, sharing the positives and sharing examples of the data that they're collecting can be a good way to motivate. Yeah. And then after you've collected your data, remember the whole point of mobile data collection is creating information. So creating like a usable story, digging into that reason that you're collecting the data. So mobile data collection letting you quickly and efficiently gathering all that data and having it in structured tables. And then that structured data is unlike data. It's easy to use even very basic tools like Excel or a spreadsheet software, and also possible to use advanced tools like GIS software or statistical software like R in order to draw more advanced conclusions for the data. Some things to remember: stuff goes wrong. Don't get defeated. Don't let that deter you from doing mobile data collection, but just be ready for it and catch it as soon as possible so that you can make corrections. Some of that can be avoided by testing ahead. The more you test, the more likely you'll catch an issue before it becomes a problem during the real thing. In addition to testing ahead, monitor during, keep a watch on things as you're going and you're doing things, and hopefully you can catch something and also make corrections before it becomes too big a problem, and check after as well. So really, mobile data collection is about making data collection simple so that you have more time on making an impact with the information. Timely and accurate data. I don't know about the single greatest, this is somebody else's quote, but is definitely a major component of making socially impactful decisions. And it's about magnifying human resources through technology. This is a quote from the ODK project, one of kind of their part of their initial mission. Technology alone won't solve all the problems, but it can be a great tool. But it's good to remember that it is just a tool. Tools need people to maintain and use them. So engage with these communities, work open source communities, work across organizations, work with other people, and work with the people, your teams, and the communities you're trying to help. Yeah, there's a ton of resources out there, especially with these open source communities. For OpenDataKit, they have a website. They have recently released a new documentation website, docs.opendatakit.org, that I think is very well written and very helpful. There's also a forum where if you don't find an answer in the documentation, you can go and ask questions there. Tons of people are very helpful there. There's also a Slack that you can join. KoBo Toolbox also has a website and a help site. And then there's also the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team Slack, which some of you might already be members, but you can log on there and there's people doing things with mobile data collection when it comes to OpenStreetMap data. And that is the end of my prepared presentation, and we can open it up for questions here.
That was great, Dan. Really, yeah, really helpful. I am thrilled that you had a chance to share all that. For questions, we can take questions. You could unmute yourself and ask a question if you wanted to, or you can type the question into chat, and I'm happy to relay it to Dan. Does anybody have any questions about what Dan just presented? I have a quick question, Dan. I don't know if you covered it. I mean, I saw that you covered it a little bit, but I just didn't hear specifically. Do you do check-ins? Like, we recently had an issue with some field collection where folks needed to do check-ins at certain periods in the day. And we find that really important from the perspective of it helps us keep track of where everybody is and make sure that everybody's safe. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, sometimes we'll do like a lunchtime check-in and then like a end of the day check-in. I haven't had any experience where like we've had to do like every hour or like call-ins or anything like that. Yeah,
I see. So like a lunchtime check-in and then perhaps an end of the day check-in. Interesting. So Ralph asked if this presentation was going to be available to download, and yes, absolutely. It's been recorded, and it usually takes a day or two to turn it around, but then we put it up on YouTube, and we send out a message to everybody who registered through Eventbrite. So you should get, if you're registered through Eventbrite, you should get an email in the next few days with a pointer to where this recording is. Anybody else have any questions?
So there's a question, would GPS functionalities of data collection tools allow check-in by the headquarters? So yeah, in the event that you have connectivity during data collection, so cellular network or perhaps enough Wi-Fi hotspots in a city or something, you could observe on your server the responses as they're coming in and kind of track where people are based on the GPS coordinates of each survey being completed. Can GPS tracks be collected as lines? The geo widget, the geo functionality of ODK has recently been improved, and I think in the next couple months it should be improved even more. And it does have an option to collect lines as part of a question. If you're trying to collect like a GPX track for the full day, there's probably better tools than a question within ODK Collect. I think OSM is an offline map navigation app that you can set to record your track. And there's another one that I'm blanking on the name right now, but there's multiple apps for kind of recording a full day's GPX tracks. The XLSForm should work in LibreOffice, OpenOffice, Microsoft Excel. All those can save out as an XLS XLS file, and the XLS form just needs to have the correct column headers and rows. There's a comment that for check-in they use OSM and also they use WhatsApp for surveyors to send in their location. Yeah, we have actually also seen instances where people use WhatsApp for data collection itself as well. Sometimes it's easier if it's just you need to collect just simple points and a note about them, rather than trying to train people on a new application and install it on a bunch of phones. If they're already using something like WhatsApp, it can be a little bit quicker and easier to have them use that platform to submit data. There's a question about data security and whether it's possible to create groups of users on ODK or KoBo to separate rights. Yeah, so Arn, with ODK, if you're using ODK aggregate, there's all your forms end up in one kind of like account, but you can give different users or one location on your server, but different users can be given different access rights. With KoBo, you can log on to their server and create an account for hosting the data, and then you can share the forms with another account that has only like data submission rights. So it's possible to segregate things in that manner. Also in data security within ODK, it's possible to encrypt your forms so that as soon as somebody saves a completed survey on the phone, it's encrypted on the phone itself, and then remains encrypted on the survey as well until you download and use your secret key to decrypt the data. How can you insert Likert scale or a tabular question on the form? There are options to adjust the appearance of the questions. There's a column that you can add called appearance where you can have some control over how things appear. On some of the smaller devices, like some of the smaller smartphones, it can be difficult because the screen just isn't big enough for some table type questions. But it's definitely possible within the XLSForm to adjust how things display.
Dan, I'm sorry, Dan. There was a question, it's up a little bit above, and I don't know if you can really address it here, but there's a question that says, I want to know how to put, we have experience using KoBo, and I want to know how to put the data collected into OpenStreetMap. That one was just above the, one of the questions, a couple of questions you've already answered, so I thought I'd just get that one in there.
Okay. If the data is just like places of interest, so POIs, so point data, for instance, like the locations of shops or, garbage collection sites or street lamp posts or something like that, and it doesn't already exist in OpenStreetMap, you can use JOSM. And I don't know the exact workflow now, but it's definitely possible to get the geodata into JOSM and then upload it to OpenStreetMap through that interface. Checking, but you needing to adjust. So instead of like your geodata, like your GeoJSON or your shapefile is going to have columns and values. You'll just need to make sure that those match like a key value pair of OpenStreetMap. If it's like other types of data, it might be a little bit more complicated. And also you want to make sure that just the key part is, the most important part is just making sure that your attributes match key value pairs of OpenStreetMap, and that you're not adding duplicate data.
I think the next question is from Ralph, and it says, what could you just talk about collecting the data, based on OpenStreetMap tags, and if that's something you take into consideration, is that beneficial?
Yeah, it's definitely very beneficial. So when we're using OpenMapKit, it actually keeps the questions you're asking in kind of the core ODK Collect part of the survey separate from the tags that you add to the OpenStreetMap feature within the OpenMapKit question. So you can collect data. You might be collecting data, so sometimes we've collected data, so for instance, on like the sanitation facilities within a household. So whether or not they have a toilet, what type of toilet, and things like that. That's not data that you would put into OpenStreetMap. So we would ask those questions separately within the ODK, the core ODK part of the survey, and keep that data private. With an OpenMapKit, since we're at the house surveying it, we might collect information on the construction materials, the number of stories, the address, things like that. And that data is added as key value pairs to the OpenStreetMap feature using OpenMapKit. And when choosing those keys and values, we choose things that are in line with OpenStreetMap community standards. Use my track. There's a question. I use my tracks or GPS tracker to collect GPS tracks, but with the amount of with what ODK Collect offers, it would be nice to have GPS tracking as well as other questions on the same platform. Is there a way to integrate the data of the two apps into the aggregate info? So since ODK Collect, you like start and then end surveys, there's not a good way to like, a single question would be like your track question, like record a line. And so you need to record your line and then move on to the next question. There's not a good way within ODK Collect to record a line, but then be asking other questions while it's recording, as far as I know. In terms of integration, I'd have to know more about what you're trying to do. One thing would be, if you're collecting an ODK, if in your ODK Collect survey, you're doing the timestamps for the start and end of a survey, you could, with a little bit of work, match those timestamps to timestamps in your GPX track. And so you could know, when they started the survey, where they were, and when they ended the survey, where they are.
Does anybody else have any more questions for Dan? I have one more quick question, Dan. This might be obvious or easy to find somewhere else, but what's the difference between OpenDataKit and OpenMapKit? And does it make sense to use one versus the other depending on what you're trying to collect?
Yeah, so it's a little bit confusing. So OpenMapKit is just like an additional, almost like a widget or something that can be our little extension of OpenDataKit. OpenMapKit by itself doesn't work standalone. You include an OpenMapKit question within your ODK survey, and when you get to that question, it will launch OpenMapKit to give you the map interface that allows you to select an OpenStreetMap feature and add tags to it. In the same way that when you get to a GPS question, ODK Collect will boot up your phone's GPS hardware, or when you get to a picture question, it loads up the phone's camera. When you get to the OpenStreetMap, OpenMapKit question, it loads up OpenMapKit and uses that application to record the tags to an OSM file and save that as part of your survey submission.
I see. Yeah, I didn't realize that. And so does it ever make sense that you would not want to use OpenMapKit? You would just focus on using OpenDataKit?
Yeah, if you're not directly surveying OpenStreetMap features, if you're not adding tags to OSM features, then you wouldn't need OpenMapKit. So if you're just collecting simple point data, like it might be enough just to do a GPS question and collect those coordinates.
I see. Okay, thanks very much. I see there are a couple more questions came in while you were answering.
How well does ODK handle drawing lines, for example, plot boundaries? I don't have a great answer for this because I know they have improved and are in the process of improving the geo geo-type questions, I think it's definitely gotten a lot better than it was. And I think, I forget, organizations have used it for doing that. So the problem with drawing, using your finger on a map to draw plot boundaries is that a lot of times people lack the map literacy to look at a phone and then look at their surroundings and match the two. Even in like an urban setting where you have a lot of reference points, so you can look and say, oh, like there's that intersection of Main Street and South Street, and there's the church, and there is the grocery store. Even in that situation, a lot of people, if they're not like a GIS professional or something in their work, can have difficulty orienting themselves. Plenty of people can, even with like Google Maps and giving them directions, will still have trouble taking the correct turns. So being able to like look at, especially in areas where there's not, like if you're in a rural area where there's not many features on the base map that you can match to your surroundings, it can be very difficult to accurately on a phone trace out the extent of an area. Some things that work better for that are taking a point. If it's generally kind of a regular shape, like a square rectangle, you can take a point at each of the corners. Doing a track and like walking the boundary, if it's not a very large area, is another possibility. ODK does, I think, you can load, I'm pretty sure you can load MB tiles. So have like your base map, but have it offline. That's a little bit more technical, but there's a number of options. And field papers is still another great option for collecting things like plot boundaries. Sometimes with the paper you can fit, it's a little bit larger than a screen on a phone or tablet, so you can see a little bit more. And sometimes it's a little bit easier to use a piece of paper. There was, for more detail about the GPX tracks, it was for data collected while on an informal transport system, like a informal minibus. And then while on the route, they want to put data about how many people get on or off, or the road quality at different points. Yeah, so it sounds like the best option might be trying to have a separate app doing the GPS. Like it might even be good to try and get a hold of like a Garmin handheld, something with a little bit higher quality GPS hardware. Especially if you're inside of a bus, like the roof of the vehicle might be affecting the signal some. And those oftentimes also will not drain battery as quickly. And then matching timestamps from your data collected in your survey to timestamps in your GPX track. Yep. So build.opendatakit.org is the graphic user interface for creating forms, and you can set a point or path or shape for the geometry type questions. And there should be more details in both in the docs.opendatakit.org about the geo widget and how to your options there. And on the forum as well, you can go into the features section and see like where they're planning, what the improvements they're planning on making. Or you can also, if something doesn't work as expected, or you think it should be different or better, you can start a discussion there. And they really appreciate when you come and talk about your experiences with the application.
Okay, if nobody has any more questions, I think this might be a really good place to wrap it up. And like I said, we'll make this recording available, and we'll put it up on YouTube, and everybody should get a notification for it. And again, I just want to thank you, Dan. I found there's just no substitute for experience. and you sharing, your wealth of experience on doing this. I've just found it super beneficial, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share it with all of us.
Yeah, thanks, Blank. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to ping me on Twitter or Slack. I'm on the hot Slack. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much everybody for attending. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you at webinars that we have in the future. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
See you.